President Biden made not just one, but 3 nominations to the FCC. 2 of them are familiar faces. That and more REC insight on the AM Radio in All Vehicles Act coming up right now.
REC, FCC Today, Michi Bradley.
This is FCC Today, the podcast for Monday, May 22, 2023. The White House has announced today what Bloomberg had speculated last week. President Joe Biden has nominated Ana M. Gomez to be a commissioner at the Federal Communications Commission. Gomez, a telecom attorney, also serves as a senior advisor for international information and policy at the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. She had served as a deputy administrator at the NTIA from 2009 to 2013. The president also renominated both Commissioners Jeffrey Starks and Brendan Carr to serve second terms on the FCC. Starks' term was extended to January of 2024 to coincide with the end of the session of Congress, while Carr's extended term would have expired a year later. In a statement, Starks congratulated Gomez and Carr on their nominations. About Gomez, he said that, quote, Ana is one of the nation's preeminent communications policy experts, and her experience would bring a unique and valuable perspective to the agency. Starks described Carr as a committed public servant with extensive knowledge of the communications sector. On the Gomez nomination, Carr stated that her career demonstrates a long-standing commitment to public service, from her leadership in the State Department's Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy to her previous service as staff counsel in the United States Senate, as well as roles at the FCC, the White House, and the NTIA. Carr also stated that the American public has benefited greatly from Commissioner Starks' leadership at the agency, from his work to end the digital divide to his national security initiatives. In a separate statement, FCC Chair Jessica Rosenworcel said that Gomez will bring with her a wealth of telecommunications experience and a substantial record of public service. Rosenworcel also congratulated Starks and Carr on their renominations. All 3 nominees will have to go through the Senate nomination process. The addition of Ana Gomez to the FCC will finally break the 2-2 deadlock in the commission and may be the key in dealing with certain controversial issues such as net neutrality and possibly even LP 250. The renomination of Carr and Starks assures that the FCC will continue to operate at full strength for years to come. After Starks and Carr, the next term to run out will be Nathan Symington in early 2026. Unlike President Biden's prior nominee, Gigi Sohn, there are no known major controversies surrounding Gomez, as well as around Carr and Starks. We expect them to all be easily confirmed soon. FCC Today, the podcast, has a comment line. Do you have an opinion about the topics discussed on the podcast? A question for me, or just general commentary about the FCC, broadcasting, or the telecommunications industry in general? Make your voice heard by calling 202-963-0852. Yes, that good old-fashioned thing called the telephone. 202-963-0852. Now write that down. 202-963-0852. It's easy to remember. That's 202, you know, the area code where all the bureaucrats are. Then up the right side of the dial, 963, and then up the center, 0852. 202-963-0852. You may hear your voice on a future podcast. We'd love to hear from you.
FCC Extra, Michi Bradley.
The AM for Every Vehicle Act. Well-intentioned, but flawed. Now hear me out. The reality is that the car companies are doing everything they can to drop AM and even FM radio from new cars. They claim it's because of the fact that AM receivers can't handle the noise generated by electric vehicles. I feel that it's more about sweetheart deals that these car makers have with companies like SiriusXM. So with that said, this legislation, which came out of the one state that seems to have the loudest legislation regarding broadcast band matters, New Jersey, and the overly aggressive New Jersey Broadcasters Association, who's likely behind this. Do we need a law to require car makers to keep terrestrial radio in cars? We definitely do. But legislation to mandate AM only does not go far enough. We need it to mandate FM. Now, the current legislation does have a couple of flaws. The first one's real easy to fix. That is the legislation's definition of the AM broadcast band. Currently, the bill text defines the band as 535 to 1705 kilohertz. If this legislation is about maintaining radio in cars for public safety, we cannot ignore the traveler's information stations that operate on 530 kilohertz. There's even one traveler's information station that's been operating by waiver on 1710 kilohertz. Ironically, that TIS is in New Jersey. Therefore, the first fix that needs to go into this legislation is to change the band definition to read 525 to 1715 kilohertz. See? An easy fix. The second one, not so easy. The current legislation has a little loophole in it. It states that a car maker can meet the AM requirement if the radio only receives HD radio broadcasts on AM. The bill text even goes out of its way to state that AM-HD is considered the hybrid MA1 system and not the all-digital MA3 system that is only being used by a couple stations. Back in the late 2000s, some AM stations tried hybrid and they either shut it down at night or shut it down completely. The problem? Adjacent channel interference. The problem that led to in-band on-channel, or IBOC, or IBOC digital receiving its alternate definition, it bleeds over channels. This was because at night, AM stations operating hybrid were causing interference to adjacent channel stations 10 kilohertz up or down, and in some cases, wiping out local stations in their own markets. Many of these being Class D and C stations that already had extremely limited nighttime coverage. This language, which I call the Tesla loophole, is going to incentivize bigger AM stations to not only turn HD back on or turn it on for the first time, but it will also incentivize them to turn it on at night. And then we're back to the late 2000s again. Many of these big stations do have co-owned FM stations, including those with HD radio capability. So what's the short-term fix here? It's actually very simple. Automakers should be required to not only provide an AM receiver, but also an FM receiver with HD capability. If every new car that comes out has an FM HD equipped in it as a standard feature and not a luxury option, these bigger AM stations with cross-owned FMs can easily capture these listeners by placing their programming stream on an HD subchannel. The modern CarPlay systems are starting to put each radio station on a menu. So it would not be too hard for someone to pick up the HD version of the AM station that is broadcasting on FM HD. The long-term solution, which would be a long-term benefit for smaller AM stations, if they're able to survive through all this, is something that I've been preaching for a very long time. An extended FM band using the spectrum from 76 to 88 megahertz. This will create 60 new channels. Right now, we only have 9, soon to be 8, full-power TV stations on Channel 6. Once rulemakings are granted and construction permits are built, Channel 5 will be down to 15 stations. Both channels have less than 80 low-power facilities each. This is such a waste of spectrum for less than 200 licensees, for which the industry does not even have real receiver antenna offerings, given the size of the antenna needed to receive low-band VHF, especially digital television, where either you have it or you don't. Snowy picture's not an option. This is spectrum that can be best utilized by at least 10 times the licensees if these two TV channels were split into 60 FM channels. And you can't tell me that WPVI, owned by one of the wealthiest companies of America, can't find a way to weasel themselves to high band or UHF? Other countries in the Western Hemisphere, with Brazil leading the way, are already working to expanding their FM bands into this spectrum. Sitel, the international organization which handles spectrum affairs in the Western Hemisphere, has already given sound broadcasting in this band its blessing. All nations except the United States, Canada, Mexico, and one Caribbean island have dumped low-band VHF for terrestrial television. America needs to be the leader here and use this spectrum much more efficiently than it is right now. Congress should make some amendments to this bill. First, fix the frequency band for 530 and 1710. Get rid of the Tesla loophole and replace it with an AM, FM, FM HD reception requirement. And let's start the long-term transition by requiring FM receivers in new cars to tune between 76 and 108 megahertz. This will make the future transition more viable. We need to think about the future, what will keep radio relevant and what is in the public interest. My proposed amendments would achieve all three of these goals.
FCC Today.
FCC Today, the podcast, is a production of REC Networks. Always on at recnet.com. It is available through Podbean, iHeart, and on the Michelle Bradley YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. Our comment line number is 202-963-0852. Keep up to minute with events around the Media Bureau and the rest of the FCC at fcc.today. Music is from the Old Thompson Creative Promo Pack 2, and the jingles are from Jam Creative Productions, Dallas, Texas. I'm Michelle Bradley, KU3N, SBE Certified Broadcast Technologist. Thank you for listening. Stay with us for more.
REC.